the business to get started with anyway.
Works for me.
Perfect. BPS, Sam, is your team here?
Yes, I believe Brian's just made it on. Brian Footy.
Perfect. I've got a little bit of administrative stuff to do anyway, so we'll get started. If central office, if Kerry, if you're ready to go.
Ready to go when you are, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anissa Asaibi George, Boston City Councilor at Large. I am chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Education. Today's hearing is on docket 0862, order for a hearing to discuss safety conditions in Boston Public Schools classrooms during extreme temperatures. This hearing is sponsored by Councilors Arroyo and Flynn. This is a public hearing. It is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Verizon Fios Channel 964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email shane.pack, that's shane.pac@boston.gov to sign up. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. You may also submit and additionally submit written testimony by emailing ccc.education@boston.gov. Over the course of this COVID-19 pandemic and prior, we've been hearing concerns from families, teachers, and advocates on the conditions of our classrooms. The lack of adequate ventilation and control of classroom temperatures is a real problem, and we need to do more to ensure that we are providing our students and faculty a safe, healthy, and welcoming school environment. I do want to let the public know, as well as my colleagues know, that I will unfortunately have to depart this hearing just a few minutes early. However, I do have staff engaged when I do depart, so we'll make sure to watch the rest of the recording, although I'll be here for most of it. I want to note that I am joined by colleagues, Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Arroyo, and expect shortly the attendance of Councilor Flynn, who is a lead sponsor. I will now pass this along to the lead sponsor, Councilor Arroyo, for introduction before we get to the panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for scheduling this in a timely way. Really appreciate it. Councilor Flynn is not with us, but I believe he's going to join us later, and I'm thankful to him for his partnership in this as well. This is an issue that's sort of longstanding. It was an issue when I was in BPS. It's an issue that continues to be an issue today, but has some more importance due to the pandemic that we're in terms of what we're looking at, but also came to light for me, especially during the application of MCAS when we were in the middle of one of our heat waves, and I had multiple teachers, I had almost half a dozen teachers reach out to me from across the city with the temperatures in their rooms well above 85 degrees. And when we're talking about where we're going as a global climate, the fact that we're having hotter summers, colder winters, those are issues that I want to see addressed in our schools, where we really do need to make sure that these schools have what they need right now. And this is the data that I have now. If it's changed, please do tell me during the report. But out of the 125 schools within BPS, only 37 of them have HVAC, which leaves about 70% of them without it, which is a wild number for the city of Boston in 2021. And so my hope here is that we can talk about this, because we know for a fact that DESE has guidelines for this, and that I'm not sure we always follow to the letter in terms of what the minimum temperature is allowed to be in a classroom and a maximum temperature is allowed to be in a classroom. And I would love to know what we're doing with this moving forward. I visited a school in my district, New Mission High School, that does not have HVAC. And one of the concerns with schools like that one, which are much older, is we bought a number of AC units. My home is not particularly new. It's an older construction. When you have too many AC units on, the actual entire electricity grid just turns off, and you have to go and turn off ACs. A lot of our school electrical wiring is that way as well. And so if we're jamming a number of AC units into those schools and not providing central air or something of that nature, you're also possibly overriding or overrunning the AC units. And so I would love to hear what the plan is for those 6,000 ACs and how we're rolling that out and what the plan is moving forward. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our guests for being here.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. I do want to note that we've also been joined by Councilor Mejia. And to get to the content of today's hearing, I am going to just skip over opening statements so we can get to it. I do want to read into the record, though, a letter from Councillor Flynn just arrived off the press that due to a last-minute scheduling conflict, I am unable to attend today's hearing on docket number 0862, a hearing to discuss safety conditions in the Boston Public Schools classrooms during extreme temperatures. Please know that I will review the tape of the hearing and my staff will be taking notes of the discussion. I believe that we must ensure that our students can learn in an environment that shelters them from extreme heat and cold, namely in buildings that are temperature controlled with proper ventilation and insulation. I urge that BPS look into funding sources to retrofit our school buildings with HVAC systems so that our students, teachers, and staff can learn and work in a healthy and safe environment. I want to thank Councilor Arroyo for giving me the opportunity to be a co-sponsor on this important hearing. And I want to thank Councilor Ivy-George for chairing this discussion. I look forward to working with everyone on this issue. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact my office at ed.flynn@boston.gov or call the office at 617-635-3203. Sincerely, Ed Flynn, Boston City Councilor District 2. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the Boston Public Schools and Mr. DePino, I think that you'll take the start.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say good afternoon and welcome to everyone, and also thank Councilors Arroyo, good afternoon, and Councilor Flynn for co-sponsoring this important conversation. I just want to start by saying I also want to thank Dr. Caselius for her leadership and visioning around her concerns around the buildings in Boston Public Schools and pushing us to really think out of the box and do better with regard to the conditions of our buildings, especially as it concerned the ventilation and cooling and heating of our buildings since her tenure. I'm happy to say that due to her leadership and initiative in her concerns around student learning, both during the school year and in summer months, she really pushed us on looking at how we can retrofit our buildings to accommodate air conditioning so the climate in the non-HVAC buildings are more conducive to learning. So today I'm here joined by two of my colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second. And we're here to discuss more about some of that work, what that looks like, and hopefully answer some of your questions. And if not, we're here to have a dialogue and answer whatever questions we're not able to cover in our presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief of Operations, Indira Alvarez.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, my name is Indy Alvarez, and I am the Chief of Operations for Boston Public Schools. I just joined about a few months ago, coming with a background from inspection of services and property management in a few other locations. And I completely agree with you, Councilor Arroyo, 100% in terms of, I'm a BPS graduate, and some of the buildings that when I went to school, and I won't even tell you how long ago that was, but it was a while ago, it's still in some dire condition. And due to Dr. Casilius bringing me on board and a number of people that we're trying to restructure our facilities department, we have a few experts and a number of, hope to say, good news in terms of work that we're moving forward with. And I don't want to just talk away. I want to go ahead and present you to Brian Ford, who's going to really give you the meat of this presentation today. Brian, will you take it over?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Ford. I'm the new Executive Director of the Facilities Department for Boston Public Schools. And I just want to say thank you, Sam. Thank you, Indy. Thank you, counselors, for having me here today to give this presentation. If it's all right with everybody, I'll begin and I could share my screen if there's anything else we'd like to get out of the way.
All right, let's get started. Thank you.
All right, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
So, we are here to talk about the docket 0862, safety conditions in Boston Public Schools during extreme temperatures. So currently, 38 of our schools in the district have all-inclusive HVAC systems. The HVAC systems maintain the air quality, they control the temperatures, they regulate humidity by pulling fresh filtered air into the buildings and blowing indoor air outside. Buildings typically fall into this category, have limited operation for windows. As a small side note, it helps keep out some of the outside information that we can't control in buildings. All central HVAC systems are operated and monitored remotely by our automatic temperature controls. Automatic temperature controls allow for Boston Public Schools, Office of Planning and Engineering, and Energy Department to monitor equipment and make adjustments. In the collective bargaining agreement with the Boston Teachers Union, parties agree that the classrooms will be shut down when temperatures are below 60 degrees or whenever the climates are becoming too offensive. DESE policy states that BPS follows the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education regulations regarding interior temperatures of classrooms. Section 7 below addresses the physical facility, general space requirements, and room temperature. Room temperatures in room occupied by students shall maintain not less than 68 degrees Fahrenheit as at 0 Fahrenheit outside, and not more than the outside temperature when outside temperature is above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, measured at 2 feet from outside walls and 20 inches above the floor. More than 12,000 windows were cleaned, repaired in school year 2020 to 21 to ensure there were operable windows in classrooms of all schools. All classrooms now have operable windows. BPS also measures the heat in all buildings 3 times a day at 7, 11, and 3 p.m. Any readings that are out of range are managed in real time. BPS has distributed fans to all of our buildings with central HVAC systems and can deliver additional fans to schools by request. Schools have been alerted of how to do this. In the summer of 2021, Superintendent Casilius charged the BPS facilities team to make air conditioning available in every school. With support from the City of Boston Procurement Office, Boston Public Schools has secured a contract to purchase 6,400 air conditioners. The BPS facility department is finalizing the contract for installation of air conditioners, which includes addressing the electrical infrastructure, as Councilor Arroyo said, as we can change it to make sure it can handle the capacity of all these buildings. In order to run the units, as well as insulating them to make sure that they're well protected from the cold and weather outside. Installation of these units is anticipated to start in October 2021 and will continue through the spring of 2022 in more than 90 buildings without AC. However, I would like to inform you that due to contingency supplying, this schedule can change, possibly based on the supply chain, COVID, and sometimes labor issues that we may see going forward just in the industry right now. The contractors that would be installing are Linwell Electrical Associates, and GW Toma is the one providing us with up to 800 units every month. Deliveries have already began, and we have them on site now. As far as shades and water sources go, we are exploring the use of window shades in classrooms, including but not limited to assessing the buildings with existing shades, which can be repaired upon request, determining window location and where shades might be applicable on the south and east side facing of the buildings. The window sizes, because they vary per building, and the cost of materials and labor to do such in comparison to that of a general HVAC upgrade to the building. As far as water sources go, access to drinkable water is provided at all schools, especially during inclement weather, and is heavily available. The use of outdoor water sources such as pools, sprinklers, and fountains are not available at every school at this time. Depending on the size of the school, water is delivered weekly or bi-weekly with additional water available upon request for schools without fountains. We've also received a grant, about $16 million, to which we are awarding contracts to package A and B to have fountains installed in schools throughout this next coming season. We are in the awarding process right now. BPS continues to work to preserve and upgrade existing buildings, many of which are constructed before World War II. And if you don't know, English High has just turned 200 years old, and that's some of the infrastructure we are working with. New school buildings will include modern comprehensive HVAC systems. The new systems will include zone temperature controls, individual classrooms, and other building spaces. Heating and cooling will be adjusted by the touch of a button and will be operated and monitored in school and remotely. Features have been incorporated into Boston Arts Academy, Dearborn STEM, and the Josiah Quincy Upper Elementary School. Extended school year. The extended school year operated at 13 schools during this past summer of 2021. 12 programs were located in buildings with air conditioning. Tech Boston Academy was the only school on the list to not have air conditioning. The community wanted to continue to use a facility because it was familiar to the students. I also want to add, the annex on the back part of Tech Boston Academy does have cooling, and to my knowledge, this is where the program was held. And that is all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. And I just want to close by saying I'm happy again to have this conversation. I'm happy for you all to host this discussion. And more importantly, it's in my opinion, where our missions are jointly aligned in this endeavor, and we know and recognize we have to do more. And I think this is a good step forward in that direction. And happy to hear any feedback and additional recommendations that the committee and council may have. Thank you. You're on mute, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You think I'd have this under control. Just grateful for that, Mr. DePina and Brian, as well, for your presentation this afternoon. I will start with the lead sponsor and then go through questions from all of our colleagues. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, and I'm happy to hear that we're making efforts on this front. The issues I have is there was a study done, which is actually brought to my attention by a BPS student, a study done by Harvard in 2018 about heat and learning that directly found that one of their findings is, and I'm quoting, without air conditioning, each 1% Fahrenheit increase in a school year temperature reduces the amount learned that year by 1%. And they found that there was direct correlation between higher temperatures in schools and lower performance on standardized testing. And they used as a study for that the PSAT test takers. And they used all of those different metrics, and they found that they could narrow it down to just incidence of heat rather than any other issue, and that those issues were worse for low-income and minority community group schools. And so in terms of BPS, and this is something I should make clear, the DESI guidelines that we talked about, which is I think no less than 68 degrees, not more than 80, is actually, according to DESI, just for special education. It's not actually for schools as a whole. When my office checked in with them, and the problem is that that's not how human beings work. And one of the issues that I had with BPS, and you can maybe explain why we had this, was I had during MCAS testing dates in June, direct photos of temperatures at 85, 86, 87 degrees within classrooms, with teachers sending those to me. I think it's well known that we had classrooms at those temperatures. If we're doing checks at 3 times a day, why was that happening, and why wasn't that changed? Because I was very alarmed to find out that as a option available to the school system, we could have moved the MCAS that day. You had the ability to move the MCAS due to those extreme temperatures, and I know we didn't. Does anybody here know why that occurred?
I can't speak to that to the moment, but I can look into it and definitely get back to you on that.
Thank you, Simo. In terms of
I'm sorry, what school was that again? I apologize.
I can get to the schools afterwards.
Okay.
I know one was in Eastie. The name escapes me right now. One was in East Boston School. And then I got another one from a Rosendale school or a JP school. Can't remember exactly which one, but I'll reach out to you directly on those.
Okay.
I'm happy to do it. In terms of the ACs, is what I heard that they're looking at an October installation date for those?
Yes, so October is our estimated start date. We have the award process happening right now, so we are estimating to start in October.
Okay. And in terms of what we're talking about, it's 6,000 AC units?
6,400, 800 being delivered monthly. We've already got the first 2 shipments.
Okay, and that was the part where you said there might be some supply chain issues that might move that timeline.
Yes, so the supply chain issues that might move the timeline could also be related to COVID compliance and the labor force, as well as supplies on additional installing equipment that might insulate or help hold brackets up for these said units.
And is BPS committing to ensuring that there are AC units in every classroom, or is this a situation where there'll be AC units in some classrooms, but not in all of them?
All classrooms. Sorry.
I couldn't hear you. Was it all of them? Or
Yes,
just
all
some?
classrooms. Yes, all classrooms.
So there shouldn't be a classroom in any school that they go into where there isn't an actual AC unit.
That's correct. And our goal is to modify windows where appropriate and make sure that they are installed in every classroom. Sorry, Brian.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, that's perfect. That's helpful. That answers the question. What's the current status of water fountains at BPS facilities? We had received reports from the Boston Latin Academy that they weren't actually operational for several days.
So Boston Latin Academy does not have water fountains, but they do have water bottle dispensers, and they are delivered weekly to them with about 50 bottles going to the school every week. 50 to 60, I'm sorry.
Okay. How is BPS preparing for the upcoming cold temperatures this fall, winter?
So we go through a cycle every year where we transition off of our AC and into our heating mode. And we typically start that mid-October, and we get the heat running around that time. And if we find that it gets colder in October, because October is that funny month where sometimes it stays warm and sometimes it gets cold. So by mid-October, we'll be ready to convert over to heat.
Great. And what are BPS's current regulations regarding minimum and maximum temperatures?
The DESI guidance. So we follow that.
Okay. And when's the last time that you went to a half day because of the heat of the classroom?
Typically what we would do is we would assess whether we would close a classroom down. In the summer is when it mainly applies. In the springtime, we would monitor it because I would say it's rarely heat waves in springtime. It more impacts the summer programming than anything. And luckily we have most of our programming is possible in our HVAC buildings. And luckily this summer, some of our planning is going to evolve and expand because we have more flexibility in that. So we're going to explore having more sites, but for the most part, we try to keep them open as much as possible. But in extreme temperatures, we would relocate them to AC buildings, or we would just decide to cancel for the day.
And when's the last time that has happened?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and take a look. I know we did relocate one program this past summer. As related to the heat wave that we had, the last one, we did relocate a program. I forget which school it was, but we did relocate one last summer.
Okay, and I know that in the July of this year, the Globe found that 50% of the BPS schools used for summer learning did not have air conditioning.
That may not be accurate. I know most of them have, but Brian can speak to the specific numbers if we have that grid up. But most of them were in AC units and some were not. But
I think the Globe's finding was that you used 63 buildings. Only 29 of them had AC.
Yeah, we'd have to, I'll double check the numbers, but unless you have that right there, Brian.
I don't have the exact numbers here in front of me as a chart, but from the ESY, we did have only 1 out of the 13 schools that did not have AC. The other ones may have just been 5th quarter, so I'd have to get more information and get back to you.
Yeah.
Great. And so as a final question for this round, I don't know if there's other counselors waiting, but when this is done, when you install these AC units, will that bring every single school classroom in BPS into compliance with having an air conditioning system? Or are we still going to have gaps in the system?
I'm going to answer your question this way, and I love if Brian can elaborate. There is a huge difference between an HVAC system and an air conditioning in a classroom. So an air conditioning will definitely cool and control and cool the air in a classroom, but not necessarily the whole building. HVAC systems are way more intricate and they cover all aspects of the building. What we're trying to do now is make sure we place ACs in as many learning spaces as possible to accommodate the temperatures for students. And Brian, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Absolutely. So exactly what Sam was saying. So HVAC is the total solution, and that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in every building. And now a lot of our buildings being very old are H and V systems with heating and ventilation. And then with the Windows operable systems that just had heating now have the ventilation as well. So this will provide the thermal comfort that everybody is looking for, but it might not have the total package. So even though we'll have thermal comfort in all the schools right now, we'll have thermal comfort in all the classrooms, there's still be more work to be done on our end.
And I'll do a second round, Madam Chair, unless you want me to go now, and then we can go to other people. I don't know who's actually on here.
No, let's go through, and I want to note that we've also been joined by Counselor Wu. I'll go to Counselor Flaherty. Counselor Flaherty for questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the panelists here. Just a couple quick questions. First is, are there any statistics that could be shared regarding exactly how many of our schools have encountered problems with extreme temperature management? And if so, are there any particular neighborhoods that contain a disproportionate amount of those schools? That's the first question. My second question is, what is the current protocol for schools that are actively encountering the extreme temperature issue? In other words, when a classroom becomes too hot or too cold, what are the steps that the faculty are instructed to follow? And then lastly, we're seeing in other school districts, both locally and across the country, that folks are stepping up using the federal pandemic recovery funds in a variety of ways to support their school communities. Are there any plans for BPS to use federal COVID funding to combat our classroom environment issues? And if so, when will you guys reach out to our chair for education? That's the chairwoman today, Councilor Sabi George. And when will you reach out to the chair of the COVID relief funds, which is yours truly? So if that is being entertained, then I think that we need to have conversations sooner rather than later with both the chair of education for the council and the chair of the COVID relief fund. So that's it for me. I just get those three questions, and I'll wait and listen intently. Thank you, Madam Chair. And also let me thank the lead sponsors as well, both Councilor Arroyo and Councilor Flynn, for their for putting this forward.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. How you doing this afternoon?
Great, thank you.
So regarding the statistics you're looking for, I'm not sure I doubt we tracked that data in that way, but I'd have to go back to the team and see what information we would collect, if anything, close to that. So I'd have to get back to you on the statistics. Regarding the current protocols, our office of our energy office are the division that monitors the temperatures on a regular basis. And we've given information and instruction to schools around the number to contact, who to contact. They should contact their custodian, and the custodian should contact their school principal, and the school principal or their designee would contact the energy office to adjust the controls up or down as needed. So for example, during COVID, we were very intentional on making sure the temperature stayed at around 76 degrees. And as needed in certain buildings, had to turn it up or down depending on the level of windows that were left open for comfort purposes. So that's pretty much the protocol. So if they have concerns, they should let their school administrator know or their custodian know, and they would contact the energy office to make adjustments and go out to adjust the temperatures in the schools. And regarding the ESSER funding, I know we're in the process of finalizing our ESSER submissions, ESSER 3 submissions this week, and you should be getting more information about that soon. I'd have to circle back with the team on exactly how and when that would look like. I don't know if I missed anything in Indy or Brian, but feel free to add to that.
Yeah, no, just obviously, I'll be looking for that data, the schools and the neighborhoods, and then obviously the COVID-19 relief funds and what efforts are underway, and when will you guys start engaging the council? Because the funds are there, but they require council approval for those funds to be dispersed. So it's imperative that those conversations start to take place sooner rather than later, so that we can get those resources to where they're needed the most. And if we're dealing with this particular issue here, and if there's an opportunity to connect the funds to solve this problem, then you guys, meaning the BPS, need to be engaging chair of education for the council, as well as the chair of COVID relief funds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel.
Thank you, Counselor Flaherty. Next, Counselor Mejia.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the sponsors for hosting and filing this hearing order. You know, as a BPS graduate and a BPS parent, this doesn't sound new to me. This seems like it's the same conversation every year. So I'm glad that we're having a hearing about it and trying to move the conversation beyond this. So I'm encouraged by this. I just have a few questions. I'm curious about BPS published an air quality testing for all schools online, which also included measurements for carbon monoxide, CO2, and dust levels. Where these tests were conducted in September of 2020, a pretty mild month temperature-wise. So are we thinking of conducting air quality tests when, you know, as opposed to May and June when the classrooms are reading at temperatures higher than 93? And when will you guys be doing those tests again? And when you say that any readings that are out of range are handled in real time in regards to that handling, can you tell me what that looks like? I'm curious about what that looks like. And then lastly, BPS has provided information on their website listing what schools have HVAC systems. When parents are signing their children up for to attend a certain school, is this information available about the air quality and access to water in their schools? Is this information that is readily available to folks so that they know what they're getting into? And this is just a trick question, but I'm just curious. I just don't understand how we are having this conversation when I have seen, he's a teacher, Michael McGuire, for years talking about the temperature. And I'm just curious about, is it that no one wanted to lean into it, or what long-term solutions has BPS been thinking about? Because to come onto the scene 18 months into this job, I just don't understand how we're talking about moving education and quality of education and all of these things, and where students are still sitting in rooms that are burning up and some spaces that don't have, you know, water. It just doesn't make sense to me. So at what point are we going to have the political will to make sure that all of our schools have high quality air, and that I don't have to see any more posts on Twitter complaining about the things that we have been talking about year after year?
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for those questions. I'll try to answer them as best possible in our team as well. Regarding the air quality tests, those were tests that we were doing last year to ensure and verify that the interventions that we put in place with the operable windows, the fans, and the air purifiers were actually circulating the air to the level and threshold that were acceptable range limits. So last year we conducted air quality tests in the beginning of the year, and then periodically throughout the year, and we did it in different formats as well. And what we learned from that last year was doing air quality testing is very labor intensive. And we were looking for solutions last year on how we can improve the monitoring of our ventilation in indoor air quality. So we made the decision last year to release an RFP for indoor air quality sensors that are going to begin to capture some of this information in a more expeditious and labor friendly manner. So we're in the process of doing some of those installations now, and we'll give you more updates on that as we go forward. So the information that we'll have will be a lot more in real time, if you will. Regarding the schools without HVAC and parent choice, we always welcome parents to come visit our schools, and during those visits, that information is available to families. We do publicize which schools have them and which schools don't for their general information online, but we do have family liaisons in every school now, and one of their big pieces of work is to engage the families around activities and information about schools. So we're hoping with that investment that also increases the communication between schools and families. And we're eagerly waiting to see how this plays out this school year as well. As far as your last trick question, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. So thanks for trying, but I can't answer that question.
Well, is there someone who, because it was a trick question, but it also really is a sincere question. I really do think that the only thing that keeps changing are the characters and the decades, but just things just seem to remain the same. So at some point, I would like to know if there is an entity or an individual or or a department that we can help support to move the needle on this. I'd like to know.
Can I,
Yeah, I
can
think
I add to, sorry, hi,
Please.
Councilor here. In the Alvarez, one of the things that hits me, and I joined BPS maybe about 4 or 5 months ago. I've been working with the city for about 26 years. And as a BPS graduate myself, and an ex-BPS parent, because my 2 daughters already graduated, I am very, and one of the things I've said to the CM and a few others when I came in, I'm dedicated to this job. I am in here to see the difference and make the difference. Because I remember the days when I was that BPS student, when I was that ESL student coming into Dorchester High, and what used to be West Roxbury High. And to understand, and the question that I constantly have for myself is, would I put my child in this building? What is the background and stuff that I could bring in to BPS as far as the number of years I work for inspectional services, and be able to partner and do collaboration and what have you, and make sure that we make the difference. One of the things that I also would like for Brian to go into is we brought Brian into BPS, stolen from City Hall, with his HVAC and engineering background, because we wanted to just not put anyone in positions. We want to make sure that we have the right people and the right expertise to really make a difference and be able to talk about what's going on with our buildings. Having the 125 buildings or so that we have that are as old as Boston Public Schools, I have a lot of grandiose ideas, but I'm also, and Sam could attest to this, pushing as far as I can to make sure that we get all the fundings that we need to make sure that we see the difference and make sure that we see the changes that we want for all BPS students across the city. And I would probably welcome Brian to talk a little bit more about the air quality testers and what exactly they're looking at and how that message comes back to the facilities team, and how we then go ahead and report back to make sure that we're making changes. It's going to be, it's a lot of work, and I don't mind it. I like hard work, but I'm dedicated. And I hear your question, and I know it's a tricky question, but I'm also, a parent, and I'm also that BPS student from way back. And I said earlier, I'm not going to say how long ago, but I do want to see the difference. It is frustrating sometimes to talk about the same things over and over. But some of that difference is getting the funding that we received to buy these ACs, and now getting the funding that we received to change and update the infrastructure in our buildings.
Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon again. My name is Brian. And as Indy was saying earlier, we were just talking about how much we want to try to put back into the schools, especially when it comes to HVAC. It's been the unsung, it's kind of just been unspoke about for so long. Everybody complains about the temperatures, but we never actually get to do anything. And I'm happy to be here where I am now, where I get to have some influence on that. And without further ado, I'll talk about some of the real-time data that we actually start to collect. So one of the things that we get to collect with the real-time readings with the IAQ sensors is the CO, the carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. We get to check on humidity in the buildings, which actually gives us an appropriate index of the temperature, real field temperatures, which you would get from the weather and everything like that. And so those come into us, and we're setting up a system right now. So we have reports that are ongoing all the time in real time. This would allow us to act on, letting us know if the CO2 gets too high, if we can open a window, if we need to add a fan, if we need to adjust the HVAC system. It also lets us know how much particulate matter is in the air. It lets us, that's the ingestible amount of debris that could possibly get into your nose. It exists everywhere, and we compare that to what's going on outside to see if we need to make some real-time changes. We're starting to unroll this out, as Sam was saying earlier, so that we can actually move forward with making these changes and having better air quality, not worrying about if a student has the appropriate lifestyle of air around them when they choose a school. A parent that might not know the system or coming here for the first time is going to have to make these choices.
And
I
just,
also want to talk about, I'm sorry?
please go ahead.
Oh, I said I also wanted to talk about the real-time temperature reading, the way that we do it right now. So we have an energy team. It's 4 of our staff members, and they work around the clock to monitor it on and off different shifts. And oftentimes a school will get devices and, let's say, boiler, air conditioner, air handling unit. All of that goes back to a computer, which they can see. If the system is off normal, one of them goes out to the building right away to check it. The system is not responding when they go out there to check it. We have internal HVAC team that goes out there and makes these changes to the system. Now, we would like to leap into the 21st century, and I think that's where we could see a lot of help and funding. And I definitely would like to see us get there.
And I would just close by saying, Councilman Mejia, all kidding aside, the time is now, right? So what you will see different is ACs in our classrooms and in learning spaces, and the temperatures being more controlled and cooler when it needs to be cooler. And we'll be monitoring the air quality and ventilation in more real time. So that will definitely be different. And hopefully in a year from now, if we have this conversation again, we'll be able to celebrate that success. And thank to you all's advocacy, as well as Dr. Castellis' leadership and visioning on this. I think we'll be at a good place.
Okay, well, we'll loop back around, I guess, next year just to see where we're at. And more importantly, what we as a council can do to support, because we can come here and throw rocks every day all we want. But at the end of the day, if we're not working in collaboration with each other, it's just a whole bunch of theatrics, right? So it's really important for us to understand what the needs are and that we're holding ourselves accountable to making sure that we're creating and setting you guys up for success too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Mejia. I don't see Counselor Braden anymore on my screen, so I'm going to go to Counselor Wu. Counselor Wu.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I apologize if some of this has been covered already. Just wanted to get a quick sense of, from a kind of proportional planning type of lens, what percentage of the federal funds do you all anticipate will be going to specifically to these sorts of basic health, safety, temperature, air quality type facilities changes or improvements for the schools?
Yeah, I don't have that percentage here with me right now, Councilor Wu. I know we are using some of the dollars for the purchase of in the installation of the HVAC units. I'm sure we could talk about the cost, but we'd have to get back to you with the full picture after we get that information.
Do you have a total amount instead of percentage?
Yeah, what are we spending now, Brian, on the purchase of the HVACs? I'm sorry, purchase of the ACs and the contract for the installation, about approximate?
Just under 20 million. So approximately 20, 9 and 13, but give or take with the 11 on the subcontractor. So it'll probably be about 20 million.
Thank you.
Got it. And in terms of how this folds into larger facilities planning for, at what point does the building undergo the full retrofit or, going for central air or whatever the equivalent is, instead of specific, individual units? How is that kind of cost benefit analysis being done?
So I'm actually excited about this one. So we've actually got a new tool for our work order system in which we can actually do the amount of repairs versus cost of full-on gut of a building and repair or replacement of equipment. It's something that we're rolling out in January, and we are keeping track of costs right now. But it is going to be more efficiently done this coming spring. And therefore, we'll be able to say we spent $10 million on English High on one system, and now we should probably think about replacing it. That's not cost effective to do so. So we can get those numbers further going further, but as of right now, it's something we have to continue to work on.
If I can
Okay,
just add
yeah.
to that, sorry, Council, if I could
Please.
just add to that. That was an area that we identified last year that we definitely need to tighten up and put in place. So last year, we definitely spent the time putting out the RP and getting the vendor on board. And now we're in the stages of implementing that work order system. And we're really excited to have that as a tool for us to help inform our work going forward.
Got it. If you have any, I don't want to create more work for everyone who is also already doing so much, but if there's any kind of summary of that system and what it involves, could you just send that to the counselors? I would love to learn more about that particular system. You know, I just want to give voice to how many times we have heard school communities basically saying this, that, you know, they need these repairs, and then it ends up, you know, months or years later, the building is deemed not habitable anymore and school has to be shut down, and all sorts of trauma that flows from those impacts. And so really, I appreciate the sponsors for this conversation, both in the context of the pandemic and obviously urgent life safety concerns, but also just in the foundation that our facilities are so intimately tied to learning and the quality of the entire environment that can wrap around students. So look forward to getting into more details there, but thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wu. Before we wrap up this panel, I want to defer to the lead sponsor to see if there's additional questions for this group.
Just one, what is the, how are we ranking or prioritizing these schools that don't have AC in terms of who's receiving these deliveries first, who's receiving this work first? How are we making those prioritizations?
Yeah, typically what we do, Council Roy, is we use our racial equity planning tool to help determine that. So we'd be working with our Office of Strategy and Equity and Accountability and having those discussions. And we're also keep in mind factors of like the type of windows that we do have versus the ACs we do receive, and how much retrofitting might be required. So obviously the ones that we can install easier and quicker we'll do first as well. And depending on those that have more complicated modifications that need to be done, but also need to be taken into consideration. The only thing I would add is also the electrical upgrades that are probably required, right? So there'll be a level of understanding what those systems look like. I think combination of all those, and I don't know if Brian, if I missed anything, but that's how I recall us approaching the work. Yeah.
Yep, I would say, Sam, you hit it right on the head. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Very good. With this, I think we're done with this first panel, and we'll move to our second panel. Thank you all for being here. I imagine some of you may stay on, but if you'd like, you're welcome to go to the waiting room and continue to view from there. So we'd like to welcome President of the Teachers Union, Jessica Tang, Ruby Reyes from the Beja, who I think is actually already on here, Maddie Taylor, who's a peer leader with the Mass Coalition for Occupational Mascosh. And I see Joe Tachi, who's already here from Mascosh. Very good. And I don't see President Tang joining us. Not sure if she's in the waiting room. Let me give a quick look. Very good. So we'll get started where I don't see Jessica here. I will go with Ruby, if you'd like to give some brief sort of opening remarks or a statement of such. Welcome, Ruby. Good to see you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ruby Reyes, and I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Education Justice Alliance. I'm also a Dorchester resident, District 4. I want to first acknowledge the youth organizers that are here from Mascosh. They've actually been working on this issue for many years around a heat campaign. And they've been working on this long before the summer's series of 90-degree days. So I just want to point that out, that this campaign has been going on for many years. So it is not a new subject that our young people have called out for support on. There is grave inequity in school facilities and decisions around repairs, resources, and what schools and what neighborhoods get used. These inequitable decisions end up hurting our highest need learners the most, including Black, Latino, English learners, and students with disabilities. Summer programming in BPS building is often used by students attending summer school or students with disabilities in ESY or the extended school year, and various summer programs. For students with disabilities in ESY, some students started the summer at schools that did not have updated HVAC systems or air conditioners. Decisions of where programs will take place and what communities have access to schools with updated HVAC systems is only one piece of the puzzle. Many of us know from our families and student feedback that where students started and where they finished, ESY was a different location. I think many of us know that that is in part thanks to the Globe's coverage of this issue. Now entering our fourth year in Build BPS. This was Build BPS is a $1 billion investment by former Mayor Marty Walsh into BPS facilities. We're now entering our fourth year, and we have still very little to show for that investment. Build BPS continues to be touted as a 10-year facilities plan, but it is not comprehensive and it has only shown a string of school closures as outcomes. Build BPS has yielded decisions around unjust school closures, mergers, reconfigurations, and the giving away of school properties for gentrification purposes, such as with the Rogers School. Beja and our partners continue to ask for a comprehensive equity analysis of the impact of Build BPS, as well as continued requests for vital information that is missing, such as a budget, a plan for swing space, and transparency around what repairs are taking place across the district. Through all of these decisions, ranging from where ESY takes place to which school communities are getting new HVAC systems, no equity analysis has been completed. No assessment of the impact on school communities and feeder patterns has been shared. No financial report or even the designation of swing space for disruption has been prepared for. Build BPS thus far has created a destabilization of school communities, a lack of vision, and decisions that have continued to hurt and traumatize school communities made up of primarily students of color and families of color. For example, the McKinley schools are in four building sites, and they work with majority Black and Latino young men and boys. The McKinleys are one of the day schools in BPS and serve students on IEPs, the majority of whom are there for emotional impairment. The school community and their buildings are nowhere on the Build BPS plan that has been shared at school committee meetings. And if BPS was in fact practicing equity and anti-racism, they would be first on the list instead of currently invisible. While this hearing is on the impact of heat and what BPS is doing in regards to temperature, Build BPS is supposed to be a comprehensive facilities plan that is transparent. It is neither. Much like ignoring the reality of climate change, we cannot afford to ignore the lack of poor planning and desperate need for a comprehensive facilities plans for our schools, most especially those that work with high needs learners, including Black, Latino, English learners, and students with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruby, Maddie, or Joe. Maddie's who's on my list, so.
Okay, yeah. Hi, my name is Maddie Taylor. I'm from Rosendale and I'm a junior at Boston Latin School. This summer, I worked with MassCosh in the Teens Lead at Work program. We do trainings in the Boston area on topics related to health and safety issues. So this year we did a lot of learning and a lot of work on climate change and heat stress, which are two prevalent issues that cause problems in BPS, as most buildings don't have HVAC or air conditioning, and there are very limited protections regarding extreme temperatures for students and staff. So MassCosh has been doing work on this issue for years, but COVID-19 has caused an increase in the immediate necessity for action due to the fact that poor air quality and a lack of ventilation in buildings also makes BPS schools unsafe for in-person learning. So as a BPS student, I have firsthand experience dealing with the effects of extreme temperatures. I've attended 4 different BPS schools throughout my life, and I've experienced this issue at every single one of them. At the Phineas Bates School in Rosendale, for example, I have memories of sitting in classrooms during the hottest months of the school year where no windows were able to be open. On the flip side, I've also sat in classroom in years before COVID where I needed to wear a winter coat because the heat was not working effectively. And I expect that this will become even more of an issue this coming winter, as with the need to keep windows open as a COVID regulation, which also stems from a lack of ventilation, combined with the lack of proper heating, classrooms will be extremely cold. An experience that really sticks out to me in dealing with extreme temperatures in BPS was taking MCAS during a heat wave this past June, like Councilor Arroyo mentioned. So I was in 10th grade and most of the students in my class came into the building for 2 days when temperatures were extremely high to take this test that you have to pass in order to graduate high school. So we sat in the school's dining hall, one of the most humid places in the building, in rows of desks. If you were lucky enough to get a seat next to one of the fans placed very sparingly around the room, you might have been slightly more comfortable than the other students, but you were still sticking to the chair just because of how much you were sweating. I remember how hard it was to focus on the test that I was taking and feeling a need to rush to finish so that I could just get out of the dining hall. MCAS is a high stakes test and can be stressful for many students just to begin with. So adding the stress of being in an extremely uncomfortable environment was just not fair to us. BPS students already deal with inequities across the board. There are higher levels of poverty and food insecurity in the city than in neighboring suburbs. Students in the city, specifically students of color, are disproportionately affected by health conditions like asthma, which can be caused and triggered by poor air quality. We missed out on so much in-person learning this past year and a half that other school districts in the state didn't. There are just a lot of disadvantages that come with going to a public school in the city. So the last thing that we need is to be forced to learn and to take important assessments in an environment that holds us back. So as Councilor Arroyo mentioned, the study by researchers at the Harvard Kennedy School found that for every degree the temperature of a classroom went up, students' test scores dropped a percentage point. That's a real issue, and it's one that definitely can be solved. In the long term, I think that HVAC systems are definitely necessary for Boston schools, at least air conditioning. For now, I think that the absolute minimum should be to not force us to take tests when the heat index gets to a certain extreme. That doesn't require any funds to do, and it's a simple measure that could be very effective and should be done. It wouldn't solve the whole problem, but it's definitely a start. School's supposed to be a productive environment where you can focus on what you're doing. Extreme classroom temperatures compromise that productivity, and something definitely needs to be done about it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Maddie. Councilor Arroyo, would you like to start with questions? And I will have to be logging off in the next few moments.
Yes, and so first and foremost, thank you both for your advocacy. My question to both of you is focusing on research or any things that you have done in terms of looking at policies in other municipalities or ways that other municipalities have dealt with this in terms of what they do. For instance, not doing tests on days in which the heat index is a certain way. But are there any sort of policies that the city of Boston can imitate or adopt that you are seeing in other municipalities, possibly other even states, that would make sense here for BPS?
Hey everyone, I can also jump in. I'm Joe Taché. I'm the Youth Programs Director at MassCosh, so I help guide the work of our Teens Lead at Work program, and have been working with Maddie since the beginning of the summer. And I think that it's stuff that's already been mentioned here today. In addition to the investment in classroom air conditioning, I think the real retrofitting of HVAC systems, or just implementation of HVAC systems in these old school buildings, and the implementation of high quality HVAC systems in new school buildings is extremely important, because I think the story that Maddie just shared, I think highlights why it's not just enough to implement air conditioning in the classrooms and the learning spaces, because there are other spaces in schools that students and teachers are in on a daily basis, and sometimes have to take these high stakes tests in. So I think it's a great first step, and hopefully there is follow through on getting these air conditioning systems in every building classroom, but also I think really updating the HVAC systems in every building to make sure that there's high quality ventilation and temperature regulation in everywhere in the school is really important. And looking into the use of those federal funds, as was referenced before, is a really important step in doing that.
We'll also mention that I think the desperate need for equity analysis to actually happen in BPS is also vital. We've received, I think the last one that we looked at was the capital spending equity analysis, which didn't even answer the questions. And you could tell it had been copied and pasted together. So just really taking the equity process seriously in terms of making these decisions. According to a FOIA request to DYS, 1 in 5 students in Boston who is detained by DYS is a former McKinley student. So that's both charter and BPS schools. So that just goes to show you the desperate need, right, for equity and where the sped to prison pipeline is really happening. And those buildings are nowhere near even mentioned in terms of HVAC, in terms of having a cafeteria, in terms of having a gym. So I think if there has ever been a desperate need for a comprehensive facilities plan, it's now, especially with all these, with the ESSER funding, with the ARP funds. I mean, Boston is in a situation where it's an embarrassment of riches. And, you know, this shouldn't be happening at this point.
Thank you all for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do want to move, if there's no additional questions, I see Councilor Braden, Councilor Wu, and Councilor Mejia have left us. Curious, I do have one person signed up for public testimony, Jody Sugarman Brosnan. And I'm not sure, Jody, if that's you in the wait room. If it is, would you please raise your hand? It is. Welcome. So we'll go right to this public testimony. And Jody, welcome. And then I do, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Jody, before you offer testimony, I do have to depart. But Councilor Arroyo, the lead sponsor of this effort, will be able to handle it from here. And I'll make sure that I'm going to listen in as I wrap up my desk here. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name's Jody. I'm the executive director at MassCosh, and I think both Joe and Maddie have spoken very well today about the issues that we raised. And just to answer your question, Councilor Arroyo, there are other districts or municipalities, not here necessarily in Massachusetts, but in other places with warmer climates where heat days are another solution. If we reach a temperature over a certain heat index, they call a half day or a whole day. We know that that's a challenge for those who need childcare and have been trying to find other methods, and something that happens during snow days. So to the extent that we can find ways of ensuring that there are healthy and safe environments in schools for everybody, that's the best case scenario. And I do know that many of our colleagues around the country in the COSH network, the Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health Network, are looking to Boston because they too want to see no test days implemented when heat index get over a certain level. So Boston could lead the effort here. I don't have much more to say, but I did want to just put it in the context of worker health and safety. Heat is a leading weather-related killer and really is something that has become so much more important as temperatures rise. And so much so that just last month, OSHA has announced that it's implementing new special enforcement initiatives around heat-related hazards, both for indoor and outdoor workers. And that means they're going to be increasing the amount of inspections they do and the interventions they provide when the heat index gets over a certain amount for indoor and outdoor workers. And they're creating a team to put together a new heat standard. And I mention this because while OSHA standards protect private sector workers, here in Massachusetts, we have a public sector OSHA law that means whenever that public sector workers get the same protection as private sector workers. That's enforced by the Department of Labor standards. So if we do get a new heat standard in the next year or two, that heat standard will apply to our municipal workers, including our teachers. So it is definitely very important to look at the impact on students, make sure that we're looking at that equity issue as we begin to look at how those air conditioners are rolled out. And I think it's important to mention that schools or neighborhoods and some of the neighborhoods which are most disproportionately impacted by other issues as a result of race and class are also turned out are the same neighborhoods that are urban heat islands and are those that are most impacted by heat. So the schools in those areas. So it's important to point that out as well. But this is also an occupational health and safety issue, and those that work in school buildings in a couple of years, there are going to be laws to protect them. So taking those steps now to ensure that those interventions are in place are smart and make sense.
Thank you. That's actually really great testimony. I almost wish we had you here as a panelist as well. So thank you to everybody who was here. I don't see anybody else here for public comment. And I appreciate what all of you have offered. I would certainly look at heat days myself as an option for that. Certainly a no cost, easy way to do this is to not have test days. I do wonder if partly why other jurisdictions start their school days in August, that last week of August, is to give themselves some room if they have to cancel a day due to heat. So because part of the problem we have here in BPS is obviously we have to make up a certain number of days, and those days come in June or July when the heat is actually very much up there. And so if we're moving days for heat, you might be moving them into a sort of an ongoing problem where you're still moving into further and further into the hottest months of the summer. So that might be something else to look at. But these other ones are things that we can very much do without having to disrupt too much in our essentials. So thank you all for your advocacy. Obviously, this is not done here. We will do some follow-ups in terms of how things are being implemented when they begin to become implemented in our BPS, and certainly when we have federal money available, that federal money goes to things like this. So thank you all. And with that, I will adjourn.